Welcome to the chat. So we've looked at the history of Islam in a number of different countries, or the history of alcohol in Islam in a number of different
Yeah,
countries. And we've seen that there was generally an attitude of tolerance, that alcohol was allowed, at least in some quantities. Maybe you weren't supposed to get drunk, but alcohol was allowed. So how would you respond to the historical evidence that we've seen?
there are a few verses. I think there's one verse where Allah said it's okay to drink it, but then uh, I think there come a point where these Arabs were coming to the mosque drunk. So I think that that's where Allah warned them, and I think that's where chapter 5, verse 90 come into it, and it was completely forbidden. And even in the hadith, it says it that these Arabs heard of this Quran verse, and then that was it. It was the end of alcohol.
Muhammad had to put a stop to drunks entering the mosque. Was this a real event or a misinterpretation? Surah 4:43 is believed by Muslims to be an instruction by Muhammad after his followers showed up at a mosque drunk. O believers, do not approach prayer while intoxicated until you are aware of what you say, nor in a state of full impurity, unless you merely pass through the mosque until you have bathed. Now, almost everything we've discovered about Islam is that everything is borrowed. So, is this instruction borrowed as well? Is it borrowed from Christianity or is it borrowed from Judaism? That is the question. And if it is borrowed, then the idea that it refers to an event that happened at the time of Muhammad gets thrown out with it. So, actually, this was not some innovation by Muhammad. A decision on this had already been codified in Judaism as much as 500 years before. And we're going to apply the historical critique now to this. So, we first need to look at Leviticus 10:1-2. Aaron's sons Nadab and Abihu took their censers and put fire in them and added incense, and they offered unauthorized fire before the Lord, contrary to his command. So fire came out from the presence of the Lord and consumed them, and they died before the Lord. The big question is, why were they killed by God? Did they do something wrong? It seems like they were doing a good thing. They were lighting fire in their censers, offering incense to God, but it refers to it as unauthorized fire. So, why did God kill them for their fire? To get an answer to this question, we need to turn to Rabbi Ishmael. Ishmael bin Elisha is a 2nd century AD Jewish Talmudic teacher and sage who left an enduring imprint on Talmudic literature and on Judaism. He is generally referred to simply as Rabbi Ishmael. He gave us a very definitive explanation for why these sons of Aaron so displeased God that they were struck down with fire. I found Rabbi Ishmael's words reported on by Rashi, another Jewish teacher of renown. And we go about 4 lines down to see what Rabbi Ishmael said. They died because they entered the sanctuary intoxicated by wine. You may know that this is so because after their death, he admonished those who survived that they should not enter when intoxicated by wine. Verse 8-9. Rabbi Ishmael is indeed just pointing out the explanation a little later on at verse 8 and 9. Again, this is from Leviticus chapter 10. So, verse 8 says, Then the Lord said to Aaron, You and your sons are not to drink wine or other fermented drink whenever you go into the tent of meeting. Okay? The tent of meeting would be the equivalent of a church or a mosque, any place where you go to pray. But this is has a very specific sense in Judaism at that time, that's where the Shekinah was. So it says, You and your sons are not to drink wine or other fermented drink whenever you go into the tent of meeting, or you will die. This is a lasting ordinance for the generations to come, so that you can distinguish between the holy and the common, between the unclean and the clean, and so you can teach the Israelites all the decrees the Lord has given them through Moses. Now, I want to point out something there. The phrase, so you can distinguish between the holy and the common, i.e., that refers to the religious sphere and the secular sphere. The prohibition against drinking alcohol is meant in relation to the tent of meeting, where the Shekinah is, i.e., the presence of God, and is not meant as applying elsewhere or more generally. So let's have a bird's eye view of this sequence of events. So first of all, we have Aaron's sons Nadab and Abihu, who were killed for being drunk in the tent of meeting. Being drunk going there was obviously banned as a result. That's the 14th century BC. So that's 2,100 years before the time of Muhammad. Okay. Then we have Rabbi Ishmael, 2nd century AD, who codifies this interpretation of Leviticus 10:3. Then we have the Quranic writings, which allude to this rabbinic ruling, or at least it appears to be, in the 7th or 8th century, depending on when you date the Quran. Then Islam forgets its true origins and misinterprets this as Muhammad's ruling, sometime in the 9th or 10th century. So that's where we're at. So my verdict then would be that later Muslims didn't know anything about the allusion to Aaron's sons entering the tent of meeting while drunk, and Rabbi Ishmael's interpretation that they were killed by God as a punishment. They confused the whole thing and made it contemporary with the supposed Muhammad of the 7th century. The event never happened in the 7th century, but in the 14th century BC with Aaron's sons. Thank you for watching.